don't have a huge background in Christian film, other than the film Christian. But what I find is there's a lot of similarities between, I think, some of the issues of Christian films and the sort of the indie film, low budget, no budget films that I was working on or I was helping friends with. And I noticed the production quality, so the camera, audio was really improving, acting was improving, but just we're running into issues with the writing. It all started at the writing. And people I'd worked with were very stubborn and kind of resisting, kind of giving up. You know, I have to have this line in here, even though it says the thing I already said 5 times.
Oh gosh.
So I'm like, you know what? I want to go back. I want to go back to where it starts. I want to kind of train up the next generation of filmmakers, be it Christian or secular. I'm going to go back to high school. So my degree is in English education. I went to school to be an English teacher, but I couldn't stop making movies, and so I kind of got the best of both worlds in what I'm doing. So that to tell you kind of where I'm coming from. So just like a teacher, I have objectives I have to put on the board every day. Today we're going to learn how to create a strong log line, plan a 3-act film, showing not telling, write better dialogue, choose the right software for you, and as a Christian screenwriter, holding yourself to a higher standard. What is a log line? This is interactive too, so feel free to yell it out.
It's a really long run-on sentence.
Yeah, dude.
I'm recording it.
Zoom in.
I don't know if you want to zoom into me.
Work it. Just kidding. Okay.
Definition of logline is a concise and striking summary of your screenplay in 1 or 2 sentences. It describes the main purpose of your story and makes perfectly clear what the goal of the protagonist is and the stakes. Earlier, if you were here for the earlier session, the stakes character of reaching that goal. So, you tell me, are the following good loglines? So, some of these are a little obscure. Dennis the Menace, comic strip Moppet plays pranks on Mr. Wilson. So tell me, who thinks that's a pretty good logline?
It's decent. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How about this untitled film that was never produced? A Secret Service agent must risk everything to save the U.S. president he's sworn to protect.
That's
Good.
That's tight.
Decent.
Decent. Okay. Edward Scissorhands. A suburban mother brings home a freaky young man who has scissors instead of hands.
Excellent.
Excellent. Okay.
I don't
All right. So we seem to like that. All right. Well, so I got bad news for you.
I was gonna say, the last one doesn't tell you what the protagonist does. It just tells you it's the premise.
The Dennis the Menace one, which isn't a great film, but it's just a great example. So we don't have any idea what makes this worth watching. Why should I care about this, right? We don't know why these pranks that he's pulling are different, unique. Why would I want to watch this, right? So how does this make it different from any other? I guess now you have prank YouTube videos, but kind of the same idea. Like, what makes that different? What makes that stand out? The untitled film. Of course, he's going to do this. He was hired for the job. There's not a whole lot of conflict there. I'm going to be talking a lot about conflict in here because that is the core ingredient for your screenplays. The Edward Scissorhands ones is okay. It summarizes the beginning. If you've seen the film, it summarizes the beginning of the film very, very well, but we don't really know what the film's tone, message, point is. So why do we care? So a little more work on that one, but it does at least draw you in. At least sounds interesting. And so my argument is that you really are starting. You should know whether or not you're going to make a good movie before you write the script, even just from the log line alone. And I know there's been a lot of talk this weekend about, do I have like a family member read over my script and give me feedback? And well, probably not exclusively, but you could pitch a log line to them, be like, is this something you would be interested in seeing? My wife's honest with me. She'll tell me if she likes my idea or not. So, so far so good. All right, here's some other log lines. So, The Godfather. That's coming up a lot today. I don't know why. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. Good?
It's not as much risk.
Not how so?
I think they could increase the risk more.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Since brings conflict. You're saying.
Is there conflict
Like-
in?
There's a lot of big words in there, and a lot of other people probably would not understand unless you knew the words.
The reluctant son means that it's a conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah, there is some
that's-
conflict,
I
yeah.
wanna make sure it goes out to like the whole widespread of people, not just.
And to bear in mind, it's definitely know your audience. So the average. This is better when you're pitching into like a studio. You know, to kind of have an idea. Is this as long as they can. The audience isn't necessarily going to see this, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's a fair point. I mean, making it understandable, yeah, for sure. Lean on Me. Anyone ever see Lean on Me? Morgan Freeman, yeah. A tough principal takes revolutionary measures to clean up a notoriously dangerous inner-city New Jersey, high school. What do you think? Who thinks it's good? We'll just do, raise your hand. It's school again. Who thinks it's good? Who thinks this could be better?
I think it could be better. I feel like it's. I don't.
I think he's a janitor.
Uh,
I mean, cleaning. Well, good job. You cleaned it.
This is before Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But it says principal.
Why is the format different? Before you had the dash and then the,
Just my poor planning skills.
which one is appropriate for industry?
So this, I'm saying these could be better, and I'll tell you what I think of these in a minute. Yes.
I'm saying the format where the other ones have Godfather dash and then start it. This starts a new paragraph.
You don't put it on a script.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just the format.
Put it on
is
a
important
pitch
here.
deck could be formatted anyway, but this would go on a pitch deck.
We're just looking at the sentence. It's not the format yet, but good you're thinking about format though. That's good.
Yes.
All right, so Forrest Gump, while not intelligent, has accidentally been president many historic moments, but his true love, Jenny Corinne, eludes him. Good logline?
So I was told you're not supposed to put your title of the film in, I guess technically it's not the title because it's his name,
Yeah.
but do you agree that the title should not be in?
I think normally, yeah. I think in this case, I mean, you could debate these. I think you could always make a logline better. And I think if I were to write it my own way, I probably would not use the title. But because it's the character, we'll let it slide at this time. So, but
Would
This may
the
be-
actual law? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking this may be the wrong answer. But to me,
Please.
it would be more descriptive if you mentioned the decade. If it mentioned the decade, because then it puts a picture in your head of what it just says historical moment. So significant moments through the 60s tells me a lot more.
because you're thinking, oh, is it centuries ago? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
This
Yeah.
log line is like a box of chocolates.
If
Yes.
they describe this as a comedy, I think this would be pretty good. If because it's like, oh yeah, not intelligent, and he accidentally arrives.
Mhm.
I think it'd be a good logline.
Good
I
point.
like that. Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree, and like I said, I think you can improve all these log lines, but what these log lines have something in common the last three did not. Does anyone know what that is? Yes.
Oh crap, I had a totally different thing. had
That's
a
okay.
question.
What do you have?
Okay, don't forget. Okay. So, my question is, you can put like historical figure. Like, I can use George Washington's name. I can use President Obama's name. Can I use whoever's name I want in my script? Is that like legal?
I mean, a historical figure, yeah.
Do they have to be dead or can they still be alive?
I think they still be live.
Oh
You
yes.
don't have to kill him.
Oh okay. I'll let you do that. Just kidding.
It's got a dark back.
I know, it's a-
The Joker.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
What's that?
I said I'll take a stab, no pun intended. I literally, anyway, as far as, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking of this literally like, sentence-wise, it seems like they all have the same flow of like the protagonist and what they're doing, and I can't remember what your logline definition said, that's why I was like, is it missing an element, but that's what I've noticed.
That's a good point. It's actually like I'm making it too complicated.
Okay, so
but-
it's lighter.
Is it
Surface.
the person da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then it goes the,
Nope.
what they're doing, da-da-da-da, okay.
Nope,
They're
that's not what it is at all.
One
It's-
sentence.
But good question.
I
So,
will not speak again.
but it's good we're thinking about this, right? This is good. It's actually one word.
Oh,
Conflict.
so-
Okay, so if we go back and look, Godfather, Reluctant, you mentioned earlier, yes, that implies conflict. Lead on me, revolutionary, what is that going to look like? You know, that's interesting. Forrest Gump, if it had just been, you know, he's been president in many historical moments, you know, and then this, and then that, which I'll get into a little bit later, but it's the fact that his true love eludes him. There's conflict here. So before you start writing your script, you need to make sure that you have conflict in there. And conflict is naturally interesting, okay? And it takes many, many forms.
So those were good.
Yes, but
Okay.
you could make these good by adding kind of more
Conflict, okay.
which maybe I should have done. All right. So, has anyone heard of 3-act structure? Who here is familiar with 3-act structure? Because I won't spend a lot, like half. But if you look at your movie in 3 acts, and it's good to kind of like write a summary before you start writing your screenplay. I usually tell my students like write a paragraph that's act 1. Now we do short films, so it's not quite as complex. But you know, it's a setup. We're introducing the characters and setting, and we're becoming acquainted with what is the world before. What is the world before the event of the film? What is life like before? Act 2 is the call to adventure. You probably have heard of. We have rising action, stuff starts to happen. There's conflict. And I meant to put climax under Act 2. Climax is generally the end of Act 2, but it's the highest point of tension in the script that changes everything. So in a dramatic film, it's the most dramatic part. If it's a comedy film, it's the funniest part of the film. And then we have falling action, and the world is forever changed. You can't go back to what the world was like before, and we see that. And we see this in the majority of films. Christian and non-Christian. So to give you an example, who's seen Elf in here? Okay, most of you. I really like Elf. I got a soft spot for Will Ferrell. But Act 1, for example, we see Buddy's life at the North Pole. We see how he was born. He was at an orphanage. We meet the different elves. Then we also see his biological dad and his family, what their life is like in New York before he shows up. Everything before the event of the film. Then Act 2, he gets called to the adventure. He tries to fit in with his family in New York, but there's constant conflict. I mean, every scene in that movie is conflict, and it's played for laughs. You kind of have like some typical fish out of water situations. If you ever want to make a comedy film easily, fish out of water is kind of a go-to sort of thing. I think it can. I don't want to say like it's cheap, but I think it's kind of an easy way to get some genuine laughs for sure. Climax, Buddy runs away, he gets upset, he runs away, and Christmas needs to be saved, of course. And conclusion, Christmas is saved, right? Buddy and his father make peace, and Buddy's family in New York and the North Pole are forever changed, the world after. So there has to be a difference. And sometimes, like in a short film, the world is different. Sometimes the joke is that it's not different at all. It's exactly the same. And so, you know, any one of these rules can be, you know, inverted. Something else that it can be useful for you when you are planning out your film and you're writing your 3-act structure and you're writing, here's, you know, my scenes 1 through 10. Avoid putting and between your beats and scenes. So if your script sounds like, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's kind of boring. That's not interesting. That's not conducive towards conflict. But try to write between your scenes, or make sure that this can work between scenes, but and therefore, between beats and scenes. So this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens. It's more interesting in that way. It feels less like you're just sitting watching. You're more engaged in the film. Show, don't tell. We had to come to this, right? Believe it or not, in low budget, no budget film, and again, we've been kind of picking on Christian films, but I saw this exact thing in secular independent film in the Philly film community. There's a tendency to tell the audience information, plot points through dialogue. Admittedly, it's the hardest thing to write, dialogue, but we seem to kind of want to jump to it because I don't know, maybe we have a voice in our head, I suppose. my recommendation to you, if you're starting out, use dialogue only when necessary. Here's an exercise. Write your film as a silent film first. Write it completely as a silent film. Show the audience the characters, their emotions and obstacles through their actions, scenery, interesting camera angles. Then go back, add dialogue, and fill in the blanks as necessary. And then I think what you'll find is that you don't need the dialogue nearly as much as you think. So I want to show a clip, and I don't know if you've seen this film, and if you have, don't say anything. It's slightly edited to be appropriate. But what I actually share this film in my class when I'm talking about showing, not telling. It's a single scene. It takes place. It's one shot. It has a jump cut, but that's I cut out something I don't want to show. Watch the scene, and you tell me what this movie is about and what these characters are about. Can you sound on?
We need to rig the microphone. Sound guy in the house.
Oh, okay. Cool. You have to, yeah. Hold on. There we go. Nelson, have you got any papers? Nelson, I owe you that 15p.
YouTube is blocking this. Yeah, your stream may be different. We've detected copyrighted audio.
Okay. What do we know about this movie? Who's seen this movie? Okay, I'm not surprised. It's a great film. Well, I won't say the name of it, but what do we know? What do we know from this scene? Very little dialogue, right? What do we know?
Easy apocalypse.
What kind of apocalypse?
Zombie apocalypse.
Zombie apocalypse. Okay.
He's completely unaware of.
So we know something about the character. The character didn't say, "I am unaware."
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
We showed it, right? And it's very funny. Obviously, you guys thought it was funny. What else do we? So how do we know it's a zombie apocalypse? What did the filmmaker write in there that showed us that?
Zombies.
Zombies. So we saw some literal zombies. What else?
The dude running for his life.
Dude running for his life. So tension. What's that? Right.
The zombie staring at him in the store.
Right. And
Him
just
slipping.
I love the bit where he slips on it and he doesn't wear.
Doesn't look down.
But he seems, you can also tell he must be from here. Like, this is where he's from, because he knows the name of the person who works there.
Yeah.
And knows that
Done that every
they're
day.
also probably a bit unaware, because he doesn't bat an eye that they didn't respond to him about the
Yeah.
papers.
Yeah.
And we could tell he was on low sleep, because just the way he was groggy all the way to the store and all up in his face and all that.
That's, what else do we know about him that might be happening to him soon?
Losing his job.
Well, maybe. He's coughing a little, he's probably getting
Oh,
cold.
getting sick.
The zombies are gonna get him because he's not looking around.
They're probably going to get him, yeah. What other, there's a.
The
couple other
zombies
small
noticed
things.
it.
Yeah.
He's bored with his life because it seems like there's a routine.
He's
You know,
single.
goes and knows to pay, walks out.
And so exactly, in his physical actions and his expressions, what did you hear?
An accent.
An accent, well, yeah. What in the background did you hear? Aside from dialogue, I mean,
There's music.
sirens,
Oh, yeah.
you heard a dog barking, that's usually a bad omen in the film, like something bad's gonna happen.
Car alarm was going off.
Car alarms going off. So there's all these little tiny subtle things. I don't know if you know, there's garbage all over the ground, like something bad has happened.
Yeah.
And we got all that from 3 lines of dialogue and 2 minutes of film. So I would encourage you to really think about that. Like, does your scene need that much dialogue? I'm gonna say probably not.
I just thought that's how New Jersey always looked.
That's Britain, but you know,
Yeah.
same difference, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry to fans at home. Well, how are we on time?
Oh, great. 5:31.
Okay. Because I was reading lines. Yeah. Okay. All right. And could you tell me your name again? I'm sorry.
It's Rachel.
Rachel. Okay. And can you be Jill? And then I need someone to be Eric. Be Eric. All right. So I'll read the stage directions. So exterior only hall day. Eric walks.
Hey, Eric.
So, you still going up to your friend's house?
No, actually, me and Fernando, we're having our anniversary.
Of course you are. I was just a rebound for you after the first time he cheated on you. Even though you didn't say that at the time. What did you say? We're moving. Yeah, because no one ever says that during a breakup.
I can't believe I thought I could actually have a civil conversation with you. But I was never anything but honest. You're the one who doesn't answer my calls. You're the one who makes your roommate answer the door when I come over. You're the one who made things this way, not me.
Okay. Thank you both. All right. Good scene, bad scene.
Jill's got a lot of dialogue there.
A lot of
In that
information.
last
A lot of information.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the classic, we both know that
Yeah.
sort of conversation.
Uh,
So if
right.
we both know, why are you
So-
talking?
We don't need, and the performances were great.
Were fantastic.
But
They elevated
the writing put me to sleep. Your script should not look like this. So, this is from scriptreaderpro.com, so a lot of the things I've taken from different areas.
What?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, shocker. Yes. But it describes here, we're hearing about something that's happened in the past rather than actually showing them do it. We meet Jill, we meet Eric's ex Jill, we learn she's still bitter. But if we really wanted to make this an interesting film, we would show him actually being done. So you're gonna have to add scenes in some areas, and I know that sometimes it costs more money, but it's better than when you have dialogue that feels very monologue-ish. The boy gets some scenes, it's not that original, but it doesn't mean there aren't a million different ways you can make it original, because if we saw Eric get dumped, we would actually care about him, right? If we saw that, we would kind of feel a little sorry for him, even if we're not supposed to, but we build some empathy with character. We could have, the writer could have showed Eric avoiding Jerry, like checking the phone, oh, I'm not, I mean, that says the same thing with less words. Maybe like sending the roommate to answer the door, we get a better idea of what he's like, his flaws, but you get the idea. And also the bonus of this is your actors won't have to remember as many lines, so it's win-win. Other tips I have for just writing, when you have to write dialogue, avoid pleasantries. I hate when the script starts with, hello, how are you doing? I'm good, thanks. How are you? You know, try to enter in the middle of a conversation. You know, when you review your dialogue, think to yourself, is my dialogue filler? Right? It's just filling, am I just trying to do I really want to write a feature-length script, and so I'm just kind of padding it out, and that's exactly what my feature-length script was. You know, so I'm saying this from experience. The same also goes for cliched statements and adages, and I'll get into that momentarily. Use monologue speeches, voiceover sparingly, if at all. Avoid redundancy, so if the audience already knows something, don't repeat it in dialogue. I think Kevin mentioned that as well. And even if that character doesn't know that yet, like that's okay. Trust your audience. Your audience can figure that out. And you can also start a scene at the end of a conversation where maybe that character's just been filled in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that can also be done if it's important these characters know information. Number 4 is something I really struggled with a lot in my own writing. Your characters should not all sound like you. That was probably the biggest criticism I received on all my scripts. Make them distinct, imagine how they would talk, based on the traits that you give them. I recommend just people watch. People watch, people listen in public, go to Starbucks and just listen, have people talk, Once you have a draft of your script done, I would highly recommend getting some friends together that are honest as much as possible and planning a script reading. And that's just basically, you sit at a table or something in somebody's house, you sign roles that it could be the actors that you want to play the roles, but it doesn't have to be. The important part is just that you hear your dialogue, you hear how it sounds, and you should not be reading a character. You should not be able to listen, hear it, and take notes, and because that's going to change your world. You're going to see your movie in a whole different light after hearing it read aloud. Here's some cliches that are some of the biggest cliches in all of film. Don't use these when possible. I won't read them all to you. But I'm sure you've seen these, right? Yeah, don't do it. You just don't get it, do you? Yeah. When you get to the point that you're ready to write your film, these are some pieces of software I recommend. The top 3, Celtics has kind of a free trial, but they used to be kind of reliable for being like a free screenwriting service, but they started kind of charging subscription service. I use that kind of all the time until they wouldn't let you write more than 3 scripts. And so I'm like, all right, well, I don't have the money for this. But if you want to spend money, the top 3 are the ones I recommend. The one I'm currently using is Scenerist at bottom. I think it's relatively new. And it lets you plan out your scenes. You have index cards in the program, and you can move scenes around. So that's what I'm using for myself right now. I'm writing a short right now. I hope to release a shoot next year at least. Bottom line, writing a thought out, nuanced screenplay takes a lot more time and work, but it is worth it. And by dealing with these issues before you start rolling, you eliminate many of the issues in production and post-production phase. You can remove dialogue and editing. I mean, that's very true, but you can't make it sound better. You can't improve dialogue and editing, and you can't show parts of your story that you never shot, unless you want to reshoot, and maybe that's kind of the case. Be humble. It's our babies. I get it. I really do. I've had devastating critiques on my stuff, but it's worth it because most of the time they're just trying to help you make a better film, and you have to be willing to write more than one draft. That's really the key. Who are you writing for? Are you writing for yourself, or are you writing for God and His people and His kingdom? If you're unwilling to try to speak to your audience, whether that is a Christian audience or secular audience, so know your audience, in the most effective way possible, if you're not willing to try to reach them in the most effective way possible, are you creating a film or are you creating a vanity project? And I say this as someone that has made vanity projects before. Christian films they can be, and they should be the same quality of mainstream movies and should strive for regardless of the budget. So unless you're hiring a professional writer, the writing quality has nothing to do with the budget. Consider your time budget. Did you budget time for writing, script readings, and rewrites before production starts? And
Excuse me.
Bless you. I'm somebody that wears a lot of hats. I'm writing it and directing it and producing it and editing it. So there's this excitement, let's just go out and let's go do it. But it can really make a big difference if you push it off for months and hey, let's get a really, really, really good script before we start rolling. Because after that, there's kind of no coming back from that until your next film. So If you're a Christian screenwriter, you're in ministry. Love your audience as yourself. Trust your audience too. If you wouldn't make yourself sit through a film like the one you wrote, don't force others. They always say in the business, give yourself time, or fix it. We'll fix it in post. Give yourself time to fix it in pre. All right. Questions? Pitches. How are we on time?
That's fine.
5:40.
Is there any way we can go and review all this stuff here? I was trying to.
I can, if you email me, and I have business cards in here. If you email me, I can send it to you. I'd be glad to.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And if you feel free to take my number, if you want to text me and send it to you that way. If we had enough time, I didn't really, I kind of thought of this today. I'm like, it'd be cool, like if people had ideas, if they wanted to pitch them, but if you don't feel comfortable with it. Yes.
I'll pitch my idea.
Awesome. Go for it.
Okay, a girl gets freed from demonic mind control, and then she's fighting to keep herself free and free others free, and she's guided by warrior angels that teach her a spiritual warfare lesson each episode.
So conflict right off the bat, that's good.
And she's a martial artist, right? So she's.
Yeah, she learns through dance and martial arts, so she has to dance battle and martial artists battle the enemies.
And who are the others that she's protecting, or start with kind of more than 3 acts here?
Right,
Because they all have to be their own kind of like mini movies.
right.
I would do your pilot.
Okay.
And have that kind of, as if it's a short film.
Yeah.
like, have an idea of where you would want it to go. You know,
Okay.
So your pilot's going to establish your characters and
The world.
The world.
Mhm.
Because what you're describing is a world that's going to be difficult for people to enter.
Everything
into.
needs to understand in the pilot.
And so you are running the risk of it over-explaining itself, like with the dialogue. You
Yeah.
can show and not tell because it's
Right.
but then showing all of that can get expensive. But anything can be good. Like anything can be done well, and so you have to be able to bring people into that. So I would start. What I was saying is, I would start off.
And that's what they actually
Yeah.
did to the, and
That's-
obviously got made.
So they had a picture of Will Ferrell in tights,
No,
or
they
that
just- that was their, they sat down to the executive.
they said.
Okay, picture this.
And
Will
you're-
Ferrell in tights. Okay.
Oh, we'll do that, okay. Excellent.
And your pitch is like your log line's kind of hard,
Right, right,
but
right.
there is a log line
I'm
for
sure,
that.
yeah.
Yes, of course.
I think that might be other questions.
So
So how do you decide between a movie and a TV show? I haven't watched TV shows since I was probably 6.
Well, TV expanded. TV is, I
construction.
mean,
I feel your pain,
Netflix
brother.
and Amazon, I
No
mean,
time for TV.
that's considered TV now. I mean,
Yeah,
those are considered regular TV, but I'll catch up on.
In college, like 100 years ago. The,
Thank you.
I was actually, I think the class that I was in was like, it was something to do with legality or something, so, okay. But this professor gets up and he said, and I have a degree in broadcasting and film, and he gets up and he says, look, I can't tell you 25 years from now, you know, how you're gonna get this stuff, if it's gonna be over the air, if it's gonna be through the internet, or a combination of this, or there's some entity that's gonna be created that we don't know of yet, like Netflix or, you know, but I do know this, there will always be content. And at that moment I went, content. Yeah, I was like that. And so, and sure enough, here we are, 25 years
Yeah.
later, and there, you know, we have all these different things. And so, and now it's, and I remember thinking, as I said, the reason why I said it, the reason, I remember thinking, I
was kind of a former conflict. I mean,
Right,
that's-
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think every story is conflict in some way, whether it's, that might even be watching, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. So, what, do you want to share your?
No, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
minutes to 6, you're right.
Your genre too, because
and it was like in a park, and it was like a Dear John letter, and I mean, thank goodness we had really good actors that, you know, you could really see the emotions on their face because they didn't say anything. You know, so it's, and I'm kind of putting on the director hat more, but I'm thinking, all right, well, what kind of shots do I have to get? Do I need to get like a close-up of like maybe the hands? I need a close-up of maybe like, you know, the crying or something. So it forces you to think visually more. Yes.
Piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
We've been watching the John Wick movies. If anybody has seen those, I like Keanu.
Bloody.
They're very bloody. I really like Keanu Reeves, but I don't think he's really good at dialogue. So the John Wick movies, I was like, oh my gosh, he's amazing. But then I realized he barely speaks in them. but I think the story, and it's a Russian director, I think.
Yeah.
So knowing that, and then the story, I just think it worked really well. So I think that would help to see that parallel. And I mean, even the sequel, I thought was just as good, but it might be a horror, I don't know. But you know, they used some of the themes that went around, but like one of the dialogues is the officer comes to the door and he's like, just peeks in, but he knows John's past, and so he's like, something along the lines like, so we're busy, or something like that.
Oh, so you're working again?
You're working again. That's all he had to say, and John Wick was